Britta Voss told the househelp to scrub the same silver tray for the third time. There was nothing wrong with it. There had been nothing wrong with it the first time, or the second. Camille Reyes looked at the tray, then at Britta, then lowered her eyes and picked up the cloth again. What Britta did not know, what she had spent 3 months working very hard to prevent anyone from knowing, was that her husband had once made a promise beside a dying woman's hospital bed. And that promise was the only reason Camille was standing in their house at all. By the time Sheldon Voss understood why his wife hated the househelp, Britta had already said the one thing he could never forgive. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. ****. Sheldon Voss had a system for everything. The way he organized his briefs the night before trial. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar, no conversation until the second cup was finished. The way he answered his phone on the second ring. Never the first. Never the third. People who worked alongside him at the firm said he was the most precise man they had encountered in 20 years of law. Not cold. Precise. There was a difference, and Sheldon had spent a long time making sure people understood which one they were dealing with. What none of them knew, what nobody in his current life knew, was that there was a chapter of Sheldon's life predating all of it. Before Northwestern law. Before the Lincoln Park house and the corner office and the view of Lake Michigan. A chapter sealed so completely that even his wife of 4 years had never been allowed near it. Between the ages of 15 and 18, Sheldon Voss had been homeless. His father left on a Tuesday in October. No argument, no warning, no note. He simply stopped coming home. The money stopped. The apartment stopped being theirs. His mother held on for 8 months before the weight of it broke something in her that never fully healed. Sheldon did not blame her. He had watched the breaking happen and understood it was not weakness. It was arithmetic. Too much taken from too little remaining. He was 15 when he started sleeping in shelters. 16 when the shelters became too dangerous and he learned the train lines instead, which cars stayed warm after midnight, which conductors looked the other way, which stations had enough foot traffic that one more body sitting still against a wall did not attract the kind of attention he could not afford. He carried a library card the way other people carry identification, as proof that he still existed in a system that had otherwise stopped acknowledging him. He was 17 when he found Alma's. A narrow restaurant on a side street in Pilsen, hand-lettered sign above the door, for tables inside, and a kitchen that produced a smell he would associate for the rest of his life with the concept of safety. Cumin. Garlic. Warm bread. Alma Reyes ran the place herself, with weekend help from her daughter. She fed people the way certain people pray, with her whole body, without calculation, without holding anything back. She found him the way she found most things that needed finding. She came outside one evening to bring in a delivery and there he was, sitting against the back wall with a library book across his knees, doing the thing he had gotten good at, which was pretending the cold was not as bad as it was. She did not ask him a single question that first night. She brought him inside, sat him at the corner table farthest from the door, and placed a bowl of soup in front of him without ceremony. He ate 3 bowls. When he finished, she told him there was a back room he could use, and that if he showed up at 6 in the morning she would have work for him. He showed up at 5:45. For 14 months, that back room was the closest thing Sheldon Voss had to a home. He swept, restocked, washed, delivered. Alma paid him what the restaurant could afford and asked nothing back. In the evenings after close, she would sit with him and ask what he was reading, not to be polite, but because she genuinely wanted to know. She argued with him about James Baldwin over reheated rice at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, in a kitchen that smelled of cumin and dish soap, and it was the best conversation he had in years. He studied for the Northwestern scholarship exam at one of those for tables. He passed. He got the scholarship. On the morning he left for Evanston, Alma stood in the doorway and held both his hands in hers and told him she expected to hear his name on the news someday, and that when she did, she would be insufferably proud, and would tell everyone she knew him first. He stayed in touch across the next decade. He watched her daughter Camille grow from a quiet teenager helping on weekends into a young woman with her mother's cheekbones and her mother's immovable sense of herself. When Alma got sick, the kind of sick that does not leave room for optimism, Sheldon was one of the first people she called. He sat beside her hospital bed on a Tuesday in March, held her hand the way she had once held his, and listened to what she needed to say before she could no longer say it. "Look after my Camille if she ever needs it," Alma said. "She won't ask. You know how she is, she won't ask anyone for anything. So promise me you'll notice." Sheldon promised. He kept that promise waiting in the back of his mind. Then, 14 months after Alma's funeral, Camille called. Britta Voss had a particular gift, the kind that works best when nobody sees it working. She could identify what a room needed and become exactly that thing before anyone thought to ask. At the firm charity gala where she and Sheldon met, the room needed someone effortlessly at ease inside it, someone who could make serious money look like a natural condition rather than an achievement. Britta provided this with a precision that matched Sheldon's own. She was polished in the way that certain people are polished. Completely. Without visible maintenance. From the outside, all the way in. Old Chicago family, she told him. Private school. A grandmother with a foundation named after her? The kind of quiet confidence that old money leaves in the people it has always claimed. Sheldon believed her. He had rebuilt himself from a condition most people in his current life would not have believed possible, and he understood that a person's origin was not required to be the most defining thing about them. He extended to Britta the same grace he would have needed extended to himself, and he never looked too carefully at the seams of the story she presented. This was the most expensive mistake of his life, though the full cost would not come due for another 4 years. They married in a small ceremony. They settled into the Lincoln Park house. She managed it the way he managed the firm, with exacting standards and very little tolerance for what fell short of them. He read it as strength. For a long time, he did not examine that reading closely enough. When Britta told him, in the fall of their 4th year, that the house had grown unmanageable and she needed real help to maintain it, Sheldon heard the request and immediately thought of Camille. He had been carrying the problem of how to help her for 2 months. Camille had called to tell him Alma was gone, that the medical bills had consumed everything, that she had been forced to leave her nursing program, that she was working 2 jobs that were slowly consuming her. She was not calling to ask for anything. She said so 3 times, which was exactly how many times Alma would have said it, and which told him everything about what kind of help would actually be received. He would not insult her with a check. He knew that before she confirmed it. But work, legitimate work, fairly paid, in a safe place, that was a different transaction. That was something she could accept without it costing her the thing that mattered most, the feeling that she was standing on her own. He created the position. He told himself he would explain everything to Britta when the right moment arrived. He just needed to find the right way in. What he did not anticipate was how quickly Britta would ensure no right moment ever came. Camille Reyes arrived on a Monday morning in November with a single bag and the composed, contained manner of someone who has learned, through long practice, to occupy exactly as much space as is offered, and not 1 inch beyond. She was 24 years old. She had her mother's cheekbones and her mother's deliberate way of listening to a room before speaking in it. She shook Sheldon's hand in the front hallway with a grip that said, without requiring words, that she was there to work and expected to be treated as such. Sheldon introduced her to Britta. The change in Britta's face happened in less than a second. He almost missed it. In the fraction of time before her expression settled back into practiced warmth, something moved across it, not surprise exactly, but recognition interrupted. A word started and then swallowed. She shook Camille's hand. She smiled. She walked Camille through the household rules with the fluency of someone who had prepared the list in advance. Sheldon registered that expression and filed it carefully under things to return to. He would return to it. But not before a great deal of damage had been done. The contempt started small, the way contempt usually does. A tone Britta used when giving Camille instructions, one she used with no one else. a consistent ability to find fault in work that was, by any objective measure, faultless. The windows not quite streak-free when they were. The pantry in the wrong sequence when there was no correct sequence. The dinner table set with the charges a fraction off-center. Each correction delivered not as a correction, but as quiet disappointment, the specific weariness of someone let down, again, by a world that cannot meet them. Camille absorbed all of it without complaint. She was not submitting. She was refusing to let another person's cruelty define the terms of the room she was standing in. The difference between those two things is invisible to people who have never needed to understand it. But the cruelty was not always quiet. 3 weeks after Camille arrived, Britta hosted a dinner for women from her charitable board. Camille moved through the evening precisely as she had been hired to do, quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention. Near the end of the meal, one of the guests watched Camille pour wine with focused care and said, genuinely, "She's wonderful, Britta. So composed." Britta smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. "Camille is still learning," she said, in the light, carrying tone of someone making a harmless observation. "Some people just need considerably more correction than others before things come naturally." The table moved on. The guest smiled politely and turned back to her wine. Camille did not react. She finished pouring, stepped back, and returned to the kitchen. She stood at the counter with both hands flat on the surface. Just breathing. Sheldon had been sitting at the far end of the table. He heard every word. He looked at Britta, already laughing at something someone else had said, her face relaxed and entirely untroubled, as though what she had just done had required no effort at all. Because it hadn't. That was what settled cold in his chest. Not the cruelty itself. The ease of it. He said nothing that night. He told himself it was not the right moment. He would come to understand, later, that he kept telling himself that because some part of him already sensed what confronting it directly would require, and was not yet ready to go there. He was protecting his past so carefully that he had left Camille standing alone in the present. That was on him. He would carry that. The cruelty did not stay at the dinner table. 2 weeks later, Britta passed Camille in the hallway while Camille was carrying a basket of folded laundry. She did not slow down. She did not lower her voice. She said it the way someone might note the weather, casually, without looking at her directly. "People like Sheldon help people like you because they feel guilty," Britta said. "Not because they see something worth helping." She kept walking. She did not look back. Camille stood in the hallway holding the laundry basket, completely still. She did not say anything. She did not cry. She stood there for a moment, then continued down the hall and put the laundry away, one folded piece at a time, with the same precision she brought to everything. But that sentence stayed with her. It burrowed in the way that precisely aimed cruelties do, not because she believed it, but because she could hear how much Britta needed it to be true. And that told her something. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. From her first day, Camille had been watching something she could not yet name. It had started in the hallway, shaking Britta's hand, looking at her face for the first time. Something had shifted in her chest. Not recognition fully formed, but the first note of a song she could not quite place. She had turned it over for days and set it aside when nothing surfaced. She let the work occupy her, the way she always did. But the feeling did not leave. She started noticing specific things. The way Britta's posture changed when Camille mentioned Pilsen in passing. The way she redirected a dinner party conversation when a guest touched on Southside displacement during the development era, moving the subject elsewhere with the speed of someone who had mentally prepared for exactly that conversational territory. The way her eyes went careful whenever Camille's mother came up in anything resembling a personal exchange. The shape of something was assembling itself. Quietly. In the part of her mind she had not fully given permission to keep looking. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The ultimatum came on a Thursday evening in January. Britta walked into Sheldon's study and closed the door with the deliberate quiet of someone who has decided a conversation is happening now. She said, with a composure she was clearly working to maintain, that Camille was not working out. That she had been patient. That she needed Sheldon to let her go. He asked her to be specific. She listed things. He listened. None of them were real, and he knew it. He said so, carefully. She shifted to something he had not anticipated, that the dynamic between him and Camille made her uncomfortable. That his protectiveness was not what a husband's relationship to a housekeeper should look like. That she was not accusing him of anything. She simply needed him to understand how it appeared. Sheldon sat very still. He recognized the structure of what was happening. He had watched this technique in depositions, a reframing designed to make the other person defend themselves against an implication rather than an accusation. Accusations can be answered directly. Implications pull the ground out from under you. He told Britta he would speak with Camille. He did not tell her what he intended to say. Asterisk. He found Camille in the kitchen the following morning and asked her to sit down. He told her honestly that Britta had given him an ultimatum. That he was not honoring it, but that she deserved to know it had been made, because she had earned the right to honest information about her own situation. He told her he would find another way to fulfill the promise he had made. That she was not losing his support. Camille listened with her hands folded on the table. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked him one question. How much does she know about my mother? He told her nothing. That he had kept the full story to himself, waiting for a right moment that kept failing to arrive. Camille nodded slowly. Something was working behind her eyes that he did not have access to. She thanked him, said she needed a few days at home, and that she would be in touch. She left that afternoon. And that evening, in her apartment, she opened the box she had brought from Alma's house, the one she had moved through 2 apartments without going through, because going through it made the finality of it a settled thing. Alma Reyes had kept everything. Receipts. Correspondence. Complaint forms filed with the city and returned unprocessed. Documents from the landlord dispute that had ended her restaurant, the predatory buyout run through a shell company, one of dozens executed across Pilsen during the development push of a decade ago. Her mother had fought it the only way available to her, by writing everything down, keeping every piece of paper, building a record with her own hands because the record might be the only thing that could not be taken from her. Camille went through the box slowly. Without rushing toward the thing she could feel herself approaching. She found it 2 hours in. A formal complaint letter, filed and returned unprocessed. Attached to it, the shell company's response, signed at the bottom by a liaison in a name she did not recognize. But the handwriting. The very particular loop of the capital B. She had seen that exact handwriting on grocery lists left on the kitchen counter of a Lincoln Park house for the past 3 months. Camille sat with the document in her hands for a long time. She did not move. She barely breathed. Then she set it down and spent 4 careful days confirming what she already knew. The shell company's original registration was public record. The associated address was a South Side apartment building. The utility records listed a tenant under a name she did not recognize at first, but which, cross-referenced against a timeline, belonged to a woman who had reinvented herself so thoroughly that she had left almost nothing behind. Almost. Camille stared at the final page for a long time. Then, quietly, to the empty room, she said, "You knew my mother." Asterisk. She returned to the house on a Wednesday morning while Sheldon was at the firm. She had timed it deliberately. She needed to speak with Britta alone first, because what happened in that conversation should be Britta's to navigate before it became something larger than either of them. She found Britta in the sitting room. She asked for a few minutes. Britta granted them with the graciousness of someone who has already decided the conversation is manageable. Camille sat down. She did not bring the documents. She did not need them. She asked, without preamble, whether Britta had ever lived at a specific address on the South Side. During a specific set of years. Under a name she then said aloud. The room changed. Not loudly. There was no sharp intake of breath, no shift in posture. What changed was the quality of Britta's stillness. The composure did not leave her face, it calcified. There is a visible difference between a person who is calm and a person who is working hard to appear calm. Camille had spent 3 months in close proximity to this woman. She knew exactly which one she was looking at. Britta said she did not know what Camille was suggesting. Camille said she was not suggesting anything. She was asking a direct question, and she would like a direct answer. A silence. Then Britta's voice dropped to the register she apparently reserved for conversation she intended to end permanently. She said that Camille was an employee. That Sheldon standing in this city was connected to his family and his name, and that nobody in any room that mattered was going to take a housekeeper's word over hers. She said the severance she could arrange was generous. She said Camille should think very carefully about what she wanted the next chapter of her life to look like. She said all of it with the steadiness of a woman who had survived harder moments by refusing to yield a single inch. What she did not know, could not have known, was that Sheldon was standing in the hallway. He had left the firm early. He came in through the side entrance, followed the sound of voices to the sitting room doorway, and stood there completely still, long enough to hear everything his wife had just said to the daughter of the woman who had kept him alive. He stepped into the room. Asterisk. Britta turned when she heard his footstep. Something moved across her face, the fastest calculation he had ever seen a human face perform. Sheldon, she said. I was just. I heard you, he said. She pivoted immediately, the way she always did. You are being emotional, she said, her voice softening into the register she used when she needed him to come toward her. You have been under a lot of pressure. Let's talk about this properly, just the two of us. Sheldon looked at her for a moment. No, he said quietly. I am not emotional. I am clear. Clarity and emotion are not the same thing. You know that about me. He turned to Camille. And then, for the first time in 4 years of marriage and 15 years of sealed silence, he told the truth. All of it. The years before Northwestern. The shelters, the train lines, the cold. Alma's restaurant on the side street in Pilsen. 14 months of soup and books and a woman who gave everything she had without asking for a single thing in return. The hospital room in March. The promise. She won't ask, Alma had told him. So promise me you'll notice. He had noticed. He had created this position because Camille was too completely her mother's daughter to accept anything she hadn't worked for. He had kept the truth from Britta because he had spent 15 years sealing that chapter, and had told himself he would find the right way to open it again. He had been wrong to wait. He understood that now. Britta, he said. His voice was very quiet. You have not been mistreating an employee. A pause. You have been mistreating the daughter of the woman who kept me alive. The room held that sentence. Britta's composure, the great constructed weight of it, did not collapse. It simply became insufficient. Like a structure built for conditions that no longer matched the weather it was standing in. She looked, for the first time since Camille had known her, genuinely small. Sheldon, I can explain. Did you know who she was, he said, when she came to this house? The silence that followed was its own complete answer. Asterisk. What came out of Britta then was not an apology. Sheldon had not expected one. What came out was something more truthful, halting, stripped of its usual architecture. She had recognized Camille on the first day. She had known who Alma was. She knew what had happened to the restaurant and her proximity to how it had happened, peripheral, she said. She had not understood the full extent at the time. By the time she did, the damage was done and she had already started building the distance between herself and that version of her life. I was afraid, she said. That is all it was. I was afraid. Sheldon listened without moving. Then he said the only thing he had left. He told her he could not speak to the choices she had made before him. People carry their histories in complicated ways, and he understood that better than most. The woman she had been before he knew her was not his to judge. But what he could not absorb, what had no explanation capable of reaching him, was this: she had looked at Camille every single day knowing exactly who she was and what she was carrying. She had chosen, every single day, to use the power she held over her to make her smaller. To protect something she had never fully reckoned with. That was not a mistake made in a previous life. That was a choice made in their home, in the life they had built together, while he was standing nearby believing something that was not true. You were not afraid of Camille because she was poor, he said. You were afraid because she remembered. And you made her pay for that every single day she was in this house. Britta opened her mouth. Then she closed it. She was, finally, out of pivots. ****. Camille left the house that afternoon. Not because anyone asked her to. Because she chose to, and the difference between those two things was the kind that had always mattered to her. Sheldon followed her to the front door. He held an envelope. She looked at it, and he could see what was moving through her, the reflex her mother had passed down like a bone-deep instinct, the immediate resistance to anything that felt like charity. "It is not a gift," he said. "It is a debt being paid. Your nursing program, covered in full. Your mother's outstanding medical bills, cleared. That is what was owed, Camille. Not to you or to her." She did not take it immediately. She stood there, her jaw tight, her eyes doing the thing they had done her whole life, refusing to release anything she had not decided to release. Then he said it. The thing he had been carrying since the hospital room in March. "Your mother told me you wouldn't ask. She said, she won't ask, so promise me you'll notice." He paused. "I noticed. I just took too long." Something in Camille's face shifted, not dramatically, not loudly. Something small and essential, the way ice shifts before it finally gives. "She fed you," Camille said. It came out before the rest of her had agreed to say it. "She saved me," Sheldon said. "There is a difference." Camille tried to speak. She could not. She stood in that doorway with the envelope in her hands and the Chicago cold pressing in from outside, and she breathed, and she did not cry, because she was Alma Reyes's daughter, and Alma Reyes's daughter did not cry in doorways. But her eyes were wet, and she did not pretend otherwise. Then she put the envelope in her bag, squared her shoulders, and walked out. Behind her, through the door she did not look back to close, Sheldon remained in the hallway. Britta had not moved from the sitting room. The space between them, which had once been a marriage, was now simply a silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind they had once mistaken for understanding. The kind that has been stripped of everything that made it bearable. The cold from the open doorway reached him before he thought to close it. *****. Camille walked to the train. Chicago met her the way it always does, completely, without negotiation, without any interest in how ready you are for it. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking. She thought about her mother, who had found a boy sitting against a wall in the cold and brought him inside without a single question. Who had fed him, given him a place to sleep, and argued with him about books at 10 o'clock at night, because that was who she was. Not occasionally. Not when it was convenient. Consistently. In the ordinary moments when nobody was watching and there was nothing to gain. She was never just the house help. She was the proof of something most people have stopped believing in, that an act of kindness, given without expectation, does not disappear. It travels. It moves through time in ways the person who gave it cannot follow or predict or control. Alma Reyes fed a homeless boy one bowl of soup. 30 years later, that bowl came back for her daughter. The train came. Camille got on. She sat down and let out one long, slow breath, the kind held for a long time without realizing it, and looked out at the city moving past her. Ahead, a nursing program. A career built in her mother's image. A life her mother had already paid for, in the way that mattered most. Kindness is not a feeling. It is a decision, made over and over again, in ordinary moments, without an audience, without a guarantee of return. But it returns. Not always quickly. Not always cleanly. Not always in the form you would recognize if someone told you to watch for it. But it returns. And sometimes, 30 years later, it walks back through a door, quietly, carrying a single bag, ready to work, and the person who opened that door does not yet know what they are looking at. But they will. They always will.